Peace and love, family. Welcome to another powerful discussion with the R.E.A.D Book Club. Tonight, we are discussing Chapter 6 of The Color of Money, Black Banks and the Racial Wealth Gap by, I pronounce her name, Mehrsa Baradaran, but some of you may get on me for butchering her name. But Baradaran, that's what I call her. But thank you so much for joining us. And I'm your host, Dr. Oya Ma'at. And Brother T, go ahead and introduce yourself to the listening audience.
Hello, family. How you doing? I'm Brother T, Brother T Rolo. Joining for another chapter reading, chapter 6 of this awesome book, The Color of Money. Looking forward to another discussion with Dr. Ma'at.
And Brother T, please tell them about JT Coins while you're at it.
JT Coin Rings is my channel on YouTube. I've been doing coin rings, making coins, making rings out of silver and gold coins for the last 2 years on YouTube. And it's a channel that I show the process, and I also do live streams talking to other coin ring makers in the community all over the country, from here all the way to Germany, to Ireland, to even Switzerland. I talk to some coin ring creators, just like myself, but I don't see many blacks. So I think out of the few that you may see on YouTube, so come by the channel, JT Coin Rings.
Beautiful, beautiful. Family, take a moment out right now to share this discussion, even if you don't have the book or haven't read the chapter. Share the show, and even stay put. Because T, what I notice is a lot of people on Sundays, when they get alerted that we're on for the R.E.A.D Book Club, people will log in and they say, oh, they're talking about a book, and they log back out. And what I encourage people to do is to still stay, because even though we're discussing a book that someone may never have heard of, or a chapter someone hasn't read, you still can learn a great deal of information just by listening to the discussion and participating in the discussion. So family, I don't want you to run out. If you say, oh, they're talking about a book I don't have, or a chapter I didn't read, still stay around and listen to the discussion. Tonight is going to be a very, very powerful discussion. We're going to be talking about the decoy of Black capitalism. And T, when I read this chapter, Brother T, a lot of the things that were happening in the 60s, a lot of the discussions, a lot of the talking points are things that we in 2022 are still discussing, and so you have people, and I'm not going to call out any folks, but there is an element in our community who encourages Black capitalism, who pushes for that. But the question becomes, is it effective? Has it been effective for Black people, to partake in Black capitalism? And this is not to say that if a brother is selling something, I don't support my brother. It's not to say that at all.
Right.
And Brother T, that I've been supporting Black businesses. I advocate for the support of Black businesses. But in terms of closing the racial wealth gap, creating generational wealth, has this been effective? And then, to be honest with you, Brother T, the talking points of this element that I'm thinking about right now, a lot of those talking points are talking points that go back to the Nixon administration. Right. And so it's reading this chapter was really eye-opening for me. It helped me to understand why brothers like yourself, I'm sitting here thinking about Geechee Yai, Dr. Jared Ball, while you all were saying certain things, because remember, I didn't know at the time. You were telling me all these things you were reading, and I'm like, what, T? I'm reading this, I'm reading that, and da-da-da-da-da. And even Yvette Carnell, like Antonio Moore, a lot of these points that just reading this book is helping me to understand their position on reparation, Black capitalism, politics. And so this chapter is really eye-opening. Shout out to Sister A Beautiful Mind. She's in the building. Peace to you. Peace to you, brother. I see that Virgo Venom is in the building. Peace and love to you, Sister Virgo. Sister Crystal is in the building. Peace to you, Sister Crystal. That's my girl right there. Sister Crystal is putting it. When I say she is putting in work, Brother T, she is putting in work with her African-centered school. So she's putting in work. And Sister Crystal, I'm still waiting for my invitation to come back. I know I fumbled the first time, but I'm still waiting for you to invite me back, Queen. Peace and love to Sister Shirley. Sister Shirley is in the building. She said, read this book with ADOS. We just talked about Yvette. She said, I read this book with ADOS. Yvette Carnell. She said, very good read. So thank you so much for joining us. The sisterhood is definitely in the building.
That's
I see
awesome.
Sister Akoma. She's in the building. I got to say, salute to the sisterhood last night, Brother T. Last night, I had the honor of interviewing sister, I call her Mama Lauren Cress Welsing,
Yes,
the
sir.
sister of Dr. Francis Cress Welsing. And when I say that the sisterhood was in the building deep last night, they were in the building deep, and it just felt good because I usually it's a lot of brothers. I see a lot of brothers in the
Hmm.
chat, and so last night it just felt good to see an overwhelming number of sisters
I can't
who
wait
were
to go
just,
back.
yeah, they were just in the building, and they were like just encouraging, Mama Lauren, go ahead, Queen Mother, we hear you. It was just really just a beautiful, beautiful um experience. Shout out to I Am King Sosa. He is in the building. He said, pseudo killers on deck. Peace and love to you. Peace and love to you. Peace and love to you. All right, let's jump right into it, T. I know you always start off with reading the first paragraph of the chapter because you said it sets the tone, and it does. So go ahead, brother T. You go ahead and lead.
We're in chapter 6 of this book called The Decoy to Black Capitalism. I want to start off by reading the second paragraph. Most importantly, in a nimble political move that has gone largely unnoticed, Nixon co opted the
Mm,
Black Power movement's rhetoric of economic self determination to push for a segregated Black economy. I want to read that part again because
please do. Please
this
do.
was the switch, the bait and switch of his whole political campaign. Nixon co opted the Black Power movement's rhetoric of economic self determination to push for a segregated Black economy, thereby justifying his neglect of other proposals for meaningful reform. Capitalism, specifically Black capitalism, became yet another rhetorical weapon used to rationalize economic inequality, which I think that was an important part in the first um, page of this chapter because he took the cries of the Black neighborhood, which was Black power, soul power, power to the people, and he says, hey, we have to silence the cry of that rhetoric. We want to give them something, but it's going to be an empty promise. And he called that empty promise Black capitalism.
Mm,
My,
mm. I'm sitting over here, brother T. I'm listening to you. No, I'm going. Go
no,
ahead. Do you wanted me to
so,
interject? No, I was
yeah,
listening to you.
I thought you wanted to interject on that point.
Mm-mm.
So basically, he wanted to really undo all of the social programs and civil rights that the Johnson administration. So, and you got to understand what happened in the Nixon administration from the 4 years that he was, time he spent in office, because he was impeached or he left office before he was one of the first presidents to be impeached or left before impeachment because of the Watergate issue. But one of the things that happened in his administration is that he wanted to make sure that he no longer put money from the government into Black issues. He definitely wanted to create that loud bell to the government that, hey, we're done with putting money into these social programs, and we're going to ask them not to really ask for any, but start asking to do things for themselves. So all his programs was basically that is what he thought he heard or what he put into play, which is the Black capitalism, the Black power, own your own resources, own your own business. But what he did was create this political system that said, we'll give you Black capitalism, but you get no help from the government.
Mm.
Now go out there and build. That was his cry, and we'll find out in the pages to come exactly what that means.
So, like you said, he's saying yes, yes, black power, right? He's saying black power, black power. Go out there and build, but we're not going to help you. We
Basically,
already we already know that we crippled you. You've
Hmm.
been crippled since slavery. We understand that there were policies that were created and implemented that further crippled you, right?
Right.
But we're going to say go on out there and build without any type of federal help. Meanwhile, we've been giving federal help to whites, white
Hmm.
immigrants, and everybody else. But we want you to go out there and build with no resources given to you. And so this was that whole let's build, that pulling yourself up by the
Bootstrap.
bootstraps rhetoric that they've
Hmm.
been telling, been saying for years. But I've, like I said on Fox Soul, we have boots, but we don't have any straps. so
Right.
so again, so I can honestly say, T, what he did was it was, I'm looking for the word, Sister Crystal, for what I want to, how I want to articulate this. It was clever. It was very clever, but I didn't want to say clever. It was something else I wanted to say. But what he
Well,
did was very, go ahead, Brother T.
he
Very
was known. He
clever,
was known as one of those type of politicians. He was a politician's politician. That's
Mm-hmm.
what. That's what the whole chapter. You see her, Mehrsa, Miss Mehrsa, basically make that point that Nixon was a politician's politician. He knew how to play the game. He
Yes.
he came up with the Southern strategy during his administration. He knew how to do those dog whistle phrases for them, for people to hear that needed to hear, and for us to be left out. He understood how to play the political game, and that's exactly what he did with this black capitalism by first of all helping to create the name black capitalism. And during this time frame, we had to realize that there were so many things thrown at the black revolutionary movement. Say, for instance, we've been called communists, socialists. So if you look at these terms and you look at like Marxism, you look at all these terms that have been thrown at us during this time frame. Every one of those ideologies and they they go against capitalism. That's when Americans get mad. You cannot go against capitalism. So anybody who talked about anything different from capitalism was a problem. So this is why he named it black capitalism. I don't want you to be separate from us. I want you to be one of the same. But I'm not giving you true capitalism. This is exactly why people hated the Martin Luther King early in the day. He was like, he's a capitalist, he's a socialist,
Yep.
he's a
He's a
communist,
communist. Yep. You hear
right?
that? Yep.
So you heard the same things when the Black Panther Party, they're socialists, they're communists. Anything that goes against the capitalism of this country, we fought against. The problem was we were never totally included in capitalism. So we always had programs that gave us the shell of capitalism.
Woo! T, we need that sound effect that you had. That
What's that?
woo! You was on fire just now, T, with that. You was on fire, but what you said was you said a whole lot. And when you talked about that whole capitalism, you constantly throughout the book we saw free market capitalism, right? And so I just want the people to understand what the book means by that. And I'm looking on Wikipedia right now, family, and I could drop the link in the chat so you can read along with me. I just dropped the link in the chat. And what I'll do is share my screen so you can read along with me. All right. So, free market, it says in economics, a free market is a system in which the prices for goods and services are self regulated by buyers and sellers negotiating in an open market without market coercions. In a free market, the laws and forces of supply and demand are free from any intervention by a government or other authority other than those interventions which are made to prohibit market coercions. Examples of such prohibited market coercions include economic privilege, monopolies, and artificial scarcity. I didn't butcher the word scarcities. Proponents of the concept of free market contrast it with a regulated market in which a government intervenes in exchange for property for any reason other than reducing market coercions. All right. So then it says that scholars contrast the concept of free market with the concept of a coordinated market in fields of study such as political economy, new institutional economics, economic sociology, and political science. All of these fields emphasize the importance in currently existing market systems of ruling making institutions external to the simple forces of supply and demand, which create space for those forces to operate to control productive output and distribution. Although free markets are commonly associated with capitalism, and that's why I wanted to talk about it, because in this book she mentions free market capitalism. Free market capitalism. She says in contemporary usage of popular culture, free markets have also been components in some forms of market socialism. Okay, so then she says historically, free market has been also used synonymously with other economic policies. For instance, proponents of laissez-faire capitalism may refer to it as free market capitalism because they claim it to achieve the most economic freedom. All right, I just didn't read the sentence above when it talked about market dominance and things of that nature. Okay, and so again, people, like T just said, people typically associate, free market and capitalism together. And so, like you said, brother T, when anyone spoke against this, you were labeled, like you said,
Label,
socialist, socialist,
communist,
communist, and different
Marxist.
things of that nation,
Mhm.
Marxist,
Yeah.
whenever you spoke out against capitalism. And so, and also, T, I want to bring up the point that capitalism, or the rhetoric of free market capitalism, was used as a weapon to fight against any to fight against anti-poverty programs. They were like, wait a minute, we have a system of free market capitalism. So if you're imposing on us that we have to hire a certain amount of black people, or we have to give them reparations, this goes against our ideals, right? This goes against
Mhm.
the free market capitalism. So she talked about that in the chapter as well. Also, brother T, when you were talking, you brought up Nixon's Southern strategy. You said he used the Southern strategy. So I wanted to define for the people what the Southern strategy is, so that when we're talking about these things, they know exactly what we're talking about. And so I had the definition, family, on the screen. I'm waiting for it to come up. I'm actually posting it in the chat, and then I'll bring it up on the screen. So it says, in American politics, the Southern strategy was a Republican Party electoral strategy to increase political support among white voters in the South by appealing to racism against African Americans. And so Nixon, brother T, he didn't outright say, I'm racist. He didn't outright state that
Yeah.
he was being racist towards African American people. He actually had a way of doing that. And so
Mhm.
I know that we're kind of not jumping around, but I want to go to the end of the chapter. And this portion that I'm getting ready to read, they talked about this on the book. I think it was called The 13th Amendment, that came out
Yeah.
on Netflix.
Yeah. 13, 13,
Yeah, the
13.
13th. Yeah, 13th. And so on the bottom of page 212, it says Republican strategist Lee Atwater gave away the playbook in a 1981 interview. He said you start out in 1954 saying nigga, nigga, nigga. He said
Mhm.
by 1968 you can't say nigga. That hurts
Hurts
you.
you.
It backfires. He said so you say stuff like force busing, states' rights, and all that stuff, and you're getting so abstract. He said now you're talking about cutting taxes, and all of these things you're talking about are totally economic things, and a byproduct of them is blacks get hurt more than whites. And so, like I said, Nixon didn't flat out, brother T, say, I'm against African American people. But if you look at his strategy, like you said, he employed the Southern strategy. He cut anti poverty programs
Mhm.
that were created to help black people. And so his rhetoric may not have, he didn't state in his rhetoric, I'm against black folks. But the things he did shows you that he was absolutely, against black people. And
Mhm.
in his campaign under his administration, there was a guy named Romney, right, brother T,
That's
that
Mitt's. That was Mitt's daddy.
huh?
He was Mitt Romney's daddy, who ran for president against Obama. So yeah, so Mitt Romney is the son of the Romney listed. I think his name is Donald Romney. What is his first name?
I'm going back to it right now. I'm looking for it right now. George Romney.
Yeah, I'm sorry, George Romney.
George Romney, and he was the HUD director
Hmm.
for Nixon. But Nixon eventually he resigned, brother T, and said that he was under the Nixon administration, and he was the one that was pushing. It
A
says
lot of.
he was for pushing on civil rights, instead of
Hmm.
pulling back. And so it talked about how Nixon's cabinet was white, but then you had again, I'm not saying George Romney. It
Hmm.
says he ordered HUD to reject any applications for water, sewer, or roads from any state that fostered segregated housing. Okay. He turned
Hmm.
this, he said he had a plan for what he called open communities, which he defined as communities in which choices are available, doors are unlocked, opportunities exist for those who have felt walled within the ghetto. And he said that this basic plan was to integrate a few neighborhoods by building public housing in white suburbs. Good God Almighty, brother T, you and I both know that
Hmm.
the white folks had a fit.
Right.
They had
They even
go ahead.
named it. They named him Mister and Mister. They call him Mister Integrator. They call him
Yes.
Mister Integrator because of these programs. Now you had to look at it like this. He thought one thing that we kind of discredit today, because we look at it in Baltimore, how everyone moves out in the county because all the whites move back into the city, right?
Right, right.
What he wanted and what he understood is this one thing about economics, about housing. He realized that if we give people federal jobs, which a lot of blacks had federal jobs at that time frame, and we give them housing and we let them benefit from the FHA and all of those programs set aside for minority spending, right? If we put them inside the white communities and let them integrate, their homes can now appreciate. Now, that's not written here in that book, but you got to think about if we're allowed to live in those neighborhoods, we're allowed to take the benefits of those neighborhoods. This is what he wanted, and this is what they were trying to fight. They look and say, hey, we don't need to integrate because blacks really want to stay where they really want to stay. They want to stay around people that they're basically familiar with,
Absolutely.
and the same as they thought the whites. So people didn't really respect this man's output, even though it did not work. You got to respect his push because he realized, hey, homes are not worth anything. Their banks are not worth anything. We got to start putting them into the system. We got to start putting them in, adding worth to their living situation because that's how capitalism works. Instead of giving them segregated wealth that has no connection to the free market, we have to include them. This is the closest thing that the government could have done at that time, doing that includes you in the system of capitalism.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And he um I mean, you see they got him out of there too,
Yes.
brother T. I'm looking, they said he pushed an ambitious bill in Congress that would have developed open communities and restricted discriminatory zoning laws. He
Mm-hmm.
drafted legislation that would have allowed the federal government to override any local zoning laws that restricted public housing.
Mm-hmm.
It says his rationale was that if the government was footing the bill on community betterment projects, the communities in question could not be permitted to actively thwart the goals of the Fair Housing Act, which is true,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so anyway, he it, like you said, they labeled him an integrationist and forced him to quit in 1970. Well, Nixon was trying to get him to quit in 1970, but Romney didn't flinch. And then he tried to send Romney to Mexico as an ambassador. So he was trying to get him out of there, brother
Yeah.
T. He was trying
See,
to get him out of there.
see, you know, get out here with this rhetoric. And
Absolutely. Hmm.
one of the things he mentioned in page 168, the bottom, it says that Romney told the population of Warren that he was withholding $3 million. See, he would go to remember we learned in other chapters that certain programs
Hmm.
benefited the white community that no blacks benefited if they lived in that area. So what he was trying to do was saying, hey, I'm gonna withhold $3 million from this area if you don't allow low income homes. So in this part of the chapter, it says Romney told the population of Warren that he was withholding $3 million in federal funds from the
Mm-hmm.
city until they accepted low income housing. Now, what can they do if they need federal money? They have to accept or go by the rules and regulations that's hit by the federal government. At least he was trying to get them to do it, because if you want the money, you got to follow the plan. So even though it didn't go through, because you had likes of Strom Thurmond. If anybody knows about politics about that time, Strom Thurmond was like Uncle Racist. You know, he was like the head of the Southern Strategy Committee of all the congressmen. He definitely held a lot of blacks from getting their just due in the South. So Strom Thurmond was well known as a Southern strategist.
Mm, mm. And then, like you said, Brother T, I wanted to go. You said that after he left, Romney left, you said no other administration will pursue active integration again. It says instead, and I thought that this was very powerful. It says instead they will follow Nixon's strategy of enforcing, and in the middle of page 170, family. Instead, they would follow Nixon's strategy of enforcing the FHA through litigating cases of outright discrimination and choosing only to enforce cases of demonstrated bias. The administration made it clear that it would only concern itself with racial and not economic discrimination. So she says, in other words, a community could refuse all low income housing, even if that meant maintaining an all white community. So, like you said, Brother T, earlier, we talked about how the rhetoric changed. So they didn't just outright say, we don't want these people in our neighborhoods because they're black, right? They said
Mm-hmm.
we don't want low income people, low income, what's it say, low income housing
Mm-hmm.
in our community. But low income housing was black folks in your community, right?
Right. That's
And
right.
so even with this made me think about how during the Roosevelt administration and the New Deal policies, remember they were shaped and articulated such that they excluded black people, but they didn't outright say we're excluding black people. They just said, well, we're going to create this policy. And if you are an agricultural worker or domestic worker, you can't, this policy doesn't apply to you. But
Right.
at that time, most black people were agricultural workers
That's
and
right.
domestic workers. And so they are really clever. I mean, when you
Mm-hmm.
read this stuff, Brother T, they're very clever and very strategic
That's right.
about how they move. And so it's very important that we continue to have conversations like this, that we continue to read books like this, so
Mm-hmm.
we won't allow them to continue to outsmart us.
That's
Because we'll
right.
sit there and just say, oh, it's just politics. No, it's politics that's hurting you. You
That's right.
understand? And so anyway, Brother T, so we talked about Romney. I wanted to move on to,
Before we move on,
okay,
we're still on that page of 170,
okay, go ahead.
because and it goes down to the last paragraph. If the poor want the affluent to provide them with housing, it would seem only reasonable that they should expect and be willing to accept the willing consent of a simple majority of those persons who are expected to help pay. So this is another thing. They gave the power to the majority um, in that community. So you have to now, instead of the government saying, hey, we're going to place this here, people were saying, no, if you want blacks to live in, or low income people or housing in this community, let us vote. Let us vote, give us the right to vote yes or no. So now you put in one more barrier in that whole mix. So you have to be real careful. I think we learned this when a couple of weeks ago, Dave Chappelle spoke against low income homes being put into his community. And he was like, hey, I'm just saying, I got this much money in this community. I'll move it out. People have the right to, in this sense, in this chapter, saying, hey, before you say you want to move into our community, give us the opportunity to say yes or no. So this is what that part. Now, also, Dempsey Travis remarked
I was looking at that, brother T.
that in the 1960s, John Fitzgerald, which is JFK Kennedy, turned on the light at the end of the housing corridor for Black Americans. Lyndon Johnson kept it burning, but Richard Milhouse Nixon turned it off in the 1970s. So basically, through all of the civil rights that we received through that JFK, Lyndon Johnson administration, it was Nixon's job to turn off all that noise. And as we were talking about prior to the show, was the United States, his first union address is when he went to in front of the American nation to talk about his plans with all the things that we went through as African Americans and here in America, all the programs. He said that I think the people who ask the most need not to ask anymore.
Mm.
This man, Spacey, said, we're not going to put any more money in those programs. We're going to ask to build a whole new basic republic and give them something separate. I advise we're going to put inside the link. We're going to put inside the link later on in the description of the show so you can hear that address that he did, I believe, in 1970. And he talks about how he's not giving reparation to those who been disenfranchised in America. He's giving reparations to nature. His reparation is not going to the Africans. His reparation is going to the result of all of the programs and all of the roads and the streets and the clutter and the crime. Because it's no longer about poverty right now. It's now about crime. Our new thing is the war on crime, not the
Right.
no longer the war on poverty.
No, absolutely, brother T. And so look on page 172, she moves the discussion into reparations. And she talks about how she mentions a few people. She mentions James Foreman. She said on the first anniversary of King's death, and on April the 25th, 1969, the Interreligious Foundation for Community Organization called a National Black Economic Development Conference to discuss plans for Black economic advancement. It says if the transformation of the civil rights movement could be distilled into one single moment, it might be when James Foreman stepped to the podium to offer his Black Manifesto. All right. So he came and he started talking, and he had a speech called the total control as the only solution for the economic needs of Black people. And in it, he demanded, reparations for slavery. Okay. It also talks about how in 1968, you had 200 Black separatists. They met in Detroit to plan a Republic of New Africa, which was to be a separate sovereign nation built in the South through reparations with its own government and elected officials. It says forever free and independent of the jurisdiction of the United States. And so economist Richard America Jr. proposed that 10% of Fortune 500 companies should be turned over to Black control. And then you had in 1969, and I'm pretty sure, Brother T, when we read the book, um, From Here to Equality, Reparations for Black Americans in the 21st Century by Dr. William Darity, he's probably, I'm pretty sure, because knowing him, I'm pretty sure he's going to mention all of these different efforts that were made, or past efforts that were made for us to get reparations. But
Yes.
anyway, in 1969, it says there was Dunbar S. McLaurin's Ghetto Economic Development and Industrialization Plan, which was akin to, it says, a domestic Marshall Plan. Outside funds would help the ghetto develop itself into a thriving community. And it said that he asked New York City to allocate 200 million to fund to a fund that would guarantee financing for businesses in the ghetto, with the fund to be administered by banks within the ghetto. So these family are efforts that have been made from 1968, 1969, and then look, I thought about Ice Cube when I read this particular section at the bottom of page 163 when they talked about the core plan, right? The core plan
Yeah,
for
173.
community. Yep, the bottom of page, the last paragraph on page 173,
Okay.
it says that the core plan for community development stood out from the rest. So it was this plan family that was proposed called the core plan. And it says, in an unlikely turn of events, it was a watered down version of a proposal made its way to the a watered down version of the proposal made its way to the Senate by 1968. Roy Innis called the plan separatist economics. It was based on Black liberation through control of institutions inside of the Black community. Innis viewed the proposal as both compensation for past wrongs and a new contract for Black America. Isn't that what Ice Cube talked about?
Yeah.
I think this was the last election. Didn't he call it a new contract for Black
With
America?
America. Yeah.
So we've been. I mean, this stuff. These conversations about reparations, family, that we're having now in 2022. This stuff isn't new. Black folks have always been having these conversations, brother T. And
Right.
I just wanted, again, when I heard that language, a new contract with Black America, I said, "Oh my goodness, this is Ice Cube
Ice Cube.
all over again."
Yeah.
Trying to just think, devise plans to get us out of this economic and political rut that we're
Right.
in. Brother
And
T, did you want to add to that?
you have to remember, at the top of this administration, when it comes down to Nixon, he had help from Patrick Moynihan. I think we mentioned him briefly last chapter. But Patrick Moynihan gave him this idea of benign neglect. Benign neglect basically meant that all the programs that have been given has not really been any help. Is they believe is counterproductive, and the dignified Negro don't want any more handouts. It's more show and prove. So he wanted to kind of show that let's write this plan that include them in the fabric of the country. But as we know, with every program that the United States has put into place, they don't want you to combat it, as you've seen, the communists, the socialists. They want you to just accept the program as it's written, and they exclude as they see fit. They want us to accept the program as it's written so they can exclude us as they see fit. So the thing is, they allow us to get in when they want us to get in. And usually it's always late. So all these
Mm-hmm.
programs that they have created thus far have only been shells. As we've seen, any program that they tried to implement based off like Roy Innis, even Romney, anything that gave us benefit, they totally wanted to remove. They wanted black capitalism, but black capitalism, as most of this book and most of this chapter has pointed out, has to control their own institutions. And every time that we could control our institutions, he says, no, I want you to control the poverty. Deal with just the poverty, but I'm not giving you any control of the institutions that we control. So that's always been a problem. So with all these programs that's just listed so far in this chapter, we don't have control of the banks.
Come on.
Because our banks have to have some type of partnership with the central banks. And you see that it's never has. One of the authors said our banks are like toy banks. Toy banks. I mean, they're for play. I'm trying to find that. I should have waited till I found the page before I mentioned it.
It's all good. It's all good.
But the point I'm trying to make is that we've been given shells and we've been given more ownership of poverty. And the game that they play, this whole Nixon administration, that's why this chapter is so important. And that's another reason why it's 50 pages. Because I'm sure she could not put it in 20 pages.
Right.
That's how intricate this man was. He shut down any opportunity that we could have given. He's the only president. Now I'm gonna go back to this page here because I wanna kind of say exactly how she wrote it.
Mm-hmm.
She stated she stated that Nixon was the only president. Nixon was not the first administration to promote minority banks and businesses, but unlike his predecessors, this was Nixon's chief focus.
Mm.
Black business would not only lead to black prosperity, it would also lead to integration by building bridges to human dignity. He used that word, dignity. So if you he believed that blacks need to be dignified. So they don't want government handouts, you know. So he wanted to make sure there's dignity across the gulf that separates Black America from white America. The fine print was that the bridge building would be the sole responsibility of the Black community. It was placed that the Black problem in the hands of Black entrepreneurs
Mm.
to fix with little federal aid.
What
That
page?
was a,
What page are you on, Brother
I
T?
had to go
That
back. I had to go back to 165.
okay? 165. Yeah, go go.
Because I wanted to focus. This man stayed true the entire administration. That he wanted to say, build black business, build up your black banks, because it's your responsibility to fix poverty. But we're not helping you. We're not giving you no financial aid, and that's the point he wanted to do. That's why I say it's so important to go to um, his address,
His
his,
State of a Union address.
his State of a Union address,
Mm-hmm.
because he mentions how basically all of those civil rights advocates and heads came to previous administrations begging. He didn't use this. He didn't say begging, but he was more crafty than that. But he says we're not having that no more. It's all about moving forward and fixing the problems that we had with nature. I'm telling you, this man was crafty.
Absolutely, absolutely, he was crafty. And I just wanted to just kind of plug in when I earlier today when I was talking earlier in the discussion when I was talking about the core plan, the bill that they tried to get through to the Senate, the watered down version of the plan that they had. Became a bill called the Community Self Determination Bill. And they described that bill. She describes the bill on page 174. And it says that it was, it was Republicans who did, support the bill and sponsor the bill. And as Brother T
Right.
stated earlier in the discussion, they said, away with black power, away with soul power. And what we need to make it in this atomic age is borrowing power, right?
Mhm.
The difference between black power and white power is white power
Green
has more green in it. And it says that, President candidate Nixon, he met with Roy Ennis, and McKenzie to discuss their plan, after which the black leaders endorsed the candidate. And in return, Nixon endorsed their bill on July 1968. Now, I don't even know what happened. I know it does at the top of page 175. Baradaran explains that there was opposition to the bill, but I don't think the bill ever made any headway. I don't think anything was really
The
done
op-
with the bill.
yeah,
It's a,
the, the,
yeah,
op- the opposition was that I believe they thought the black entrepreneurs that supported the bill, it was really benefiting them the most. So I think grassroots, um,
black
have,
folks. Yeah,
um,
yep. Mm-hmm.
but they're the ones that saying, "Hey, this is not going to benefit us." So they looked at the black entrepreneurs at the time as sellouts. They looked at the black people at that
No,
time,
they did.
entrepreneurs, as opportunists. Because they were saying, "Hey, this program is not going to benefit us, or if he does things for the banks, it's going to put us out of whack." So a lot of programs that could have benefited the black banks was basically like kind of fought against by the elite at that time, the black elite at that time.
Mhm. And it says at the bottom too, Brother T. So just to kind of, plus one what you said, it said when the senators realized that the bill did not have the support of the entire black community, they backed away
Back
from it.
away
So
from it,
nothing
right?
ever happened. So then moving on, she talked about how Um, you had Robert Kennedy, who ran. This is during the 1968
Page six.
presidential election. Page 176.
Okay, got
She talked about Robert Kennedy and Herbert Humphrey and how they proposed plans, to help Black folks. They called it, Black economic self-determination plans. But Humphrey, I'm looking at the bottom of page 176, because remember, Nixon said, well, we can support Black capitalism without giving them anything. And so Humphrey said, look, it says Humphrey jabbed at Nixon's Black capitalism plan, calling it double talk. When Nixon promised voters that the program would cost little, Humphrey retorted, of course it will take money. Talking about Black capitalism without capital is just kidding political paychecks. And
Mhm.
so she goes on to say that the check had insufficient funds, but Nixon's double talk on Black capitalism paid political dividends.
Mm.
Nixon's Southern strategy was effective because he used race as a wedge issue without actually talking about race. Right. And it goes into what you were talking about earlier, T, associating crime with Blackness and promising law and order. He could signal allegiance to white voters, fearful of Blacks without sounding like a racist.
Mm.
And it says Black capitalism was another side strategy. By associating Blacks with welfare, dependency, and embracing Black enterprise, he was able to cut economic aid to the ghetto and oppose integration in the guise of promoting Black power. By using the unobjectionable and racial neutral rhetoric of free market capitalism, Nixon undermined Black demands for economic redress and reparations.
Mm.
I mean, that was basically the chapter, brother T. When
Yeah.
you think about it, that's what he did. That's what he did. And so let's move on to page one. Is there anything you wanted to talk about that was on page 176, 177, brother T?
Um, I want to go back a little further. What Nixon explained.
Okay.
Nixon voice explained. For the past 5 years, we've been deluged by programs for the unemployed. Now, this is when he goes about. This is his little rhetoric. For the past 5 years, we've been deluged by programs for the unemployed, programs for the cities, programs for the poor. And we have reaped from these programs an ugly harvest of frustration,
Mm.
violence, and failure across the land. This was subtle subversion of the Kerner Commission's language, which called violence the harvest of racism. Now, violence was a result of government aid. Never mind that the violence preceded the poverty programs. Then the music became more upbeat, and the camera panned across the images, construction sites, a factory line, a shipyard, and candidate intoned. We should enlist private enterprise to solve the problems of America. Once again, it was a sleight of hand. They realized that, hey, let's continue to sing this song about how private enterprise, entrepreneurship can help rid poverty. So if I push Black capitalism, if I push Black entrepreneurship, that would have them to deal with any issues at hand. Because any programs that we put place just cause more violence. It just caused more mayhem all across the land. These people were slick. And what we have to realize when we hear about these upbeat overcomings, I always ask a person who was the president, what was the policies at the time,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and how do they benefit the upcoming, the ability of that company, and how did it hurt the people at the bottom? I want to know because we have a lot of books like Black Fortune, all these another books that talks about how well we did and what we started. But I always ask, what's the policies? Who's the president? How did it benefit the person on top?
Mm-hmm.
And how did it hurt the person on bottom? And once you look at that, you'll see these little underhand policies written all in a mix.
Mm. And then I just want to add, brother T, that he had a follow up ad called Black Capitalism. And this is where it says candidate Nixon promised to rescue the ghetto with a hand up and not a hand out. So like you said,
Mm,
brother T, it was, look, we're going to promote this black capitalism, black power, black whatever, and but we're not going to give you anything. We're going to give you a hand up and not a hand out.
because handouts
Okay?
hurt.
Right, handouts hurt. And he said integration must come, but in order for it to come on a sound and equal basis, the black community has to build from within. T, did you hear this, T? This
Yeah.
is what he said. Integration must come, but in order for it to come on a sound and equal basis, the black community has to build from within. So that means we're not going to help you. You got to start within yourself and build yourself. And then once you build yourself, we let you on in,
What does that
right?
sound like? What does that sound like? That sounds like what we hear every day.
Yes, today's rhetoric, the same talk, the same talk. And it says presumably, he meant that blacks would have to work towards integration themselves, as though segregation had been an act of nature and not a system imposed and enforced by racism and state power.
Power.
Now I have it highlighted, but I want to take my pen and underline that right there. You get
Right.
what I'm saying? Blacks would have to work toward themselves. Look at this.
You need to go
As through
meditate in the corner.
right,
I need you to go
right.
drink your tea,
Mm-hmm.
and figure it out. Then you come back, and you should be okay. Then we should, and the integration should help. It's the same rhetoric. All it is says pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? It's all it is. This is basically what it is. They just found a more creative way to reinstate it.
And then look at this. Then he had another speech called The Human Dignity,
Yep.
where he talked about he said that the country needed to go beyond civil rights.
Hmm.
It says actually in the initial draft in the Nixon's presidential files, the speech said forget civil
So
rights. And Nixon highlighted the word forget and replaced it with go beyond. The message was the same. He said, we cannot meet the needs of the late 60s with solutions of the early 60s. He wanted to put an end to more laws, more money, because they would only lead to more of the same frustration, more of the same rioting, and more of the same despairs. Then also, Brother T says in a radio program in April of 1968, Nixon took his case directly to blacks. He said that Black Americans do not want more government programs which perpetuate dependency. They don't want to be a colony in a nation. They want pride and self-respect and dignity. And that can only come if they have an equal chance to own their own homes and to own their own businesses and to be managers and executives as well as workers, to have a piece of the action in the exciting ventures of private enterprise. So again, Brother T, his rhetoric was designed to make black people feel bad about government redress, bad about getting assistance from the government. I mean, they played a lot of psychological games, political games, economical games, but also psychological games with black folks during that time.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
But what we have to understand is during this time, the economy was changing all through this administration. So when you talk about private institutions, private entrepreneurship, you gotta understand that the government was changing so much. This is when the dollar was taken off the gold standard. So our dollar was depreciating at that time as well. So he needed to change the whole outlook to say, okay, we need more businesses because we have to produce more as a country because our dollar is now loosening. It's now that we have to start. Our banking systems are changing because now we have to worry more about fractional banking. We have to lend more. We have to promote more homes because our dollar was being taken off of the gold standard. I think 1973, 1974, August 15th, 1973, I believe. So that right there changed the whole economics. So he had to shift. So that's why no more money can be put into programs in his eyes. He's like, hey, we got to start going for enterprising. So now, but we're not going to give money to them. We're going to let them in on the plan, but we can't let them in on the plan.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
we suffered during that time frame as well. This is why the new push for economic inclusion was being painted as what we should be a part of, because the economic system was changing in America. And
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people don't understand that's the year when gold and silver was no longer traded for the dollar here in America.
No,
So
thank you for that, brother T.
mhm,
No, thank you for that. And I just wanted to talk up to kind of go back to that radio program in April 1968. Baradaran said that Nixon took like some of the talking points from Malcolm X, but then he left out some of Malcolm X's talking points.
well, yeah, do that, yeah, do
Yeah,
that.
absolutely. It says that Nixon left out the part where Malcolm said, "Show me a capitalist, I'll show you a bloodsucker." He
Mhm,
also ignored the point of the Black Power platform that included a demand for land, reparations, and political sovereignty. So it wasn't just about Black capitalism. The Black Power um, the Black Power platform or the Black Power movement wasn't just saying we want Black capitalism. They were saying give us land, give us
mhm,
reparation, give us political sovereignty. So Nixon left that part out, and it says the part Nixon embraced enthusiastically was voluntary segregation, self-reliance, and private enterprise. So those are the elements that he took from the Black Power movement's talking points. And
right,
so again, I mean, I'm sitting here. She kind of reiterates this stuff. Um, I have something highlighted here called Black. I said I had on page 180. I wrote in the modern Black exceptionalism, because it's talking about Buckley. Who was Buckley? Let me go back to that.
uh,
Who was Buckley, brother T? Oh, William Buckley.
exactly.
Okay, so it was an editor. So a national review editor, William Buckley. It says he praised the spirit of militant Black leaders who have been preaching Black initiative, Black capitalism, and yes, Black power. Now it says this, and this is what I have highlighted. Buckley proposed that the still undefined program need to involve the entire Black populace because scattered success can give universal hope. And so when I read that, I said that's a strategy that they still use today, brother T. Well, they'll show you Jay-Z and say, this is a Black capitalist, and look at how successful he is. He's a billionaire. They'll show you
Right.
Kanye West. Look at Kanye West. Look at Oprah.
Hmm.
And so they'll parade these Black folks in front of us
Aberration.
as examples of success, right? And with the goal of giving us universal hope. So and then look what they did with Barack Obama. Once Barack Obama became president, you had teachers across America telling little Black boys, if you want to become president, you could become president. Look at Barack Obama. He did it. And so you get what I'm saying, T. So
Most definitely.
this game of universal hope, of showing, he called it scattered success. So this game of displaying scattered success, and I wrote in the margin, Black exceptionalism. They
Hmm.
still play that game with us today. So they'll show you, like I said, like a Jay-Z, and they'll act like, well, hey, if you just get involved in Black, look at what it did for Jay-Z. Look at what it did for Oprah. Look at what it's doing for Kanye. These are the models.
And
And so then
everyone has a
Black folks,
story.
go ahead. What you say, brother T?
Everyone has a story.
Come on.
So when you hear about a Jay Z, you hear also Jay Z did two things. Especially think about how old Jay Z is. Now he's looking at the crack era, right? Also look at him also not finishing school. So he sold crack supposedly, and he didn't graduate high school.
Mm-hmm.
So this person is an exception. Hey, look, he's a billionaire status. He didn't graduate high school, and and he also sold drugs. That puts him in a whole arena of people who live in maybe lower income
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
areas. You have um, Oprah. You have a
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
person who was given opportunity based off of having affirmative action, which was talked about here in this chapter as well during the Nixon administration, that gave people opportunities to go into the media and other jobs, being a woman, you know what I'm saying, being a Black woman,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
also being single mother, how single household, going through the atrocities that she's been through, the rape, and unfortunately, this people must have a story that they overcame to be that aberration that we look at, that hope. So all the
Mm-hmm.
things that we have gone through in our communities, they put in a bag, shake it up, and then they put out those individuals and say, "Look, see, from the dust, from the dirt, from all the things that happen in your community. See what can happen in America if you only understand capitalism." Um, and this is what comes out of it. You can do it too, not knowing that they're part of the machine, that
Right.
they're part of this hope machine that's been created, unfortunately. So we have to be real careful. And that's once again, for those they put above for us to look at, we must examine. We must examine real well. Okay, what year were they born? What opportunities that they supposedly overcame? How did they get those? Once we realize, we could go always back to policies. We can always go back to law. We can always go back to what was given during that time frame, and we can say, okay, now we can't be blinded because everything that happens during a time frame, and during that time frame, certain laws, policies are prevalent,
That's
and we
right.
have we have to understand it. So we realize that's nothing but a game, another game they play.
Absolutely. And I wanted to kind of just kind of, we don't have to go through all of the programs that Nixon established. I know one was he signed an executive order establishing the Office of Minority Business Enterprise within the Department of Commerce. And it said it had a vague mission. It says vague mission. Beyond this vague mission, okay, let me get into what the mission was. It says so it was given a responsibility for
What page are you
advising. I'm on the bottom of page 180.
on? Okay.
So Nixon created this Office of Minority Business Enterprise within the Department of Commerce. And listen to this. It said the OMBE was not allocated any direct funds, but it was instructed to seek private business contributions and help from federal agencies, which meant in real political terms was that the OBM was given the responsibility for advising, encouraging, mobilizing, evaluating, collecting, information, and coordinating activities. But beyond this vague mission, it did not have a mandate or a budget with which to make unilateral decisions or to make any loans or grants. So how the hell are you going to have a office of minority business enterprise? They didn't even have a damn budget, right? It was just he signed this in and said, "Yep, we're gonna do what we're gonna do is we want them to encourage and mobilize and collect and and coordinate activities." But they didn't have a budget. They couldn't give black folks loans or grants.
Wait,
So it was useless.
what is it for?
It was useless. So they
Nixon,
talk. Go ahead.
Nixon put programs together like this. Like, you remember when your mom used to say, "Go to the store and buy this X, Y, and Z." You know it's not enough. You say, "Mom, it's not enough," and she says, "Make it enough." he, he
Right,
put
right.
he put programs together when has no legs to stand on that can help us out in no way. Just so in the history books, he can say that he created what the OMBE. It's what did it do for us?
Right. Right. Didn't do anything. I mean, didn't do anything. And then I want to go over to page 181,
Mm-hmm.
and it talked about Cross. So Cross was a it says
Right.
another true believer in black capitalism was Theodore Cross. It says a white entrepreneur and philanthropist who served as a key Nixon advisor on black capitalism. So he wrote a book. And it says right here, Cross understood that black businesses were stuck outside of the systems of power prohibited from entry by its white gatekeepers who were the ones in possession of jobs, housing, and capital. Blacks needed to gain power simply because those with power had used it against those without and had no incentive to share their wealth. Cross explained that the problem with black banking in particular was not a lack of supply, but a lack of demand. And this is true today. So he wrote this book in 1969, but today white people still are the gatekeepers, of wealth building resources, of capital. They're still of power. They still haven't shared their power, brother T, and they're not going to. Black folks are crazy if they think that white people are going to share their power with them. They haven't. They didn't do it then, and they're not going to do it now.
Oh, man, I hope that you can find that portion of the book when they said that whites did not want to do business with or give loans to blacks, meaning the white banks. And one of the bank heads said that he don't even want to give $300. He don't even trust giving $300 to a black person to borrow, basically. And I'm trying to find it in this part of the book. Um, so when it comes down to the banks, banks could not even operate like regular banks,
Hmm.
based off giving money from the federal government. They wasn't given enough to even benefit from, and when it was given money from the federal government, it cost them more to do so, because they couldn't loan it out, they couldn't gain any interest on it, so it was no benefit for them. It was basically a loan, but the loan put them in default,
Mm.
and a lot of banks kind of folded. And I believe that even this chapter talk about um, Jackson. Was the baseball great who integrated Major League Sports? Jackie Robinson.
Jackie Robinson. Mm-hmm.
And this, I hope I didn't go ahead of the chapter. Did he
No,
talk
no, no.
about Jackie Robinson in this chapter about when he hit the bank? He said the hardest job that he ever did was not just segregated military. It was not going through um, the major leagues. It was hitting a black bank. He said being in charge of a black bank was the most stress that he ever dealt with his life. After his bank closed, I think that's when he passed away. And I think the author said that it's because of the stress of trying to get a black bank profitable and moving it along. It was that stressful. Through all that what that man been going through the civil rights movement and everything, it was running a black bank.
Mm. Mm. And then, so brother T, I wanted to just add that there were other programs that were proposed. Venable. I'm looking to see who Venable was, and maybe I skipped who Venable. Oh, Abe Venable. Venable. It says he was the highest ranking black director of OMBE, the Office of Minority Business Enterprise. And so he proposed an ambitious plan called the National Strategy, where it promised to invest 8.6 billion and to create 400,000 new minority businesses in 10 years using the FHA loan guarantee program as a model. And it says that Stans, I got to see who Stans is. I'm going back and forth, family. Stans, I guess. Oh, Maurice Stans. He was the Secretary of Commerce and a long-term friend of the Republican steward and accountant by profession. This says that when he heard of this plan, this $8.6 billion plan, he got it shut down immediately. The OMBE, they also launched what was called the Minority Enterprise Small Business Investment Company, and they had a plan for 100 black companies to put in a minimum of $150,000 of capital. All right, so that would be 15,000, I guess, per business. It says which would be used as a down payment to be multiplied by private private credit. But it says a year later, the program was an absolute failure, right? Because 50 of the minority businesses in the program, of the 50 minority businesses in the program, 25 had already failed by 1970, and 16 were more in trouble. So again, this is trying to force black people to put up capital that they didn't have, in order to multiply the capital to help them out. It says I'm at the top of page 19. I'm sorry, 184, and I'm trying to rush because I know we've been on for a while. It says by 1970, the country was in a recession. My mind went right back to 2008 as soon as I heard the word recession. Remember, we were just in a recession. So it says in 1970, the country was in a recession, and small businesses were the most vulnerable and least likely to succeed, Yet all of the programs that were coming out during the Nixon administration were geared towards creating small businesses. So small businesses are failing in 1970 because we're in a recession, but yet these programs were designed to create more small businesses,
But
which didn't make sense. Go ahead, brother
and
T.
that's the point I was trying to make. I said, remember, the economic climate was changing through his
Yes.
administration. So in order to say, oh, we got to create something that they take their poverty in their own hand. See, they said, hey, let's do enterprise, let's buy houses, but this is going to help you through your own poverty. So he was basically saying, what's about to happen, you need to get yourself out of it. That's basically how he was doing it. It's about to be a change. Remember, I said he also took the dollar off the gold standard. So he saw, they knew this was coming. They knew the recession was coming. But they didn't want to put anything into place to help blacks. So what did he do? I need you to create your own enterprise to take care of your own poverty. Thank you very much.
And then, so, I love how she drives home the point that small small businesses was no way to grow wealth in the 1960s. She
Mm-hmm.
drove that point home. She talked about in 1969 how it says Section 8A of the Small Business Act authorized the SBA to manage a program to coordinate government agencies into allotting a certain number of contracts to minority small businesses. They still have this in place, by the way, to set aside, a certain number of contracts to minority small businesses. But of course, white folks fought back and said that this was preferential treatment for minorities. And it says at the bottom that multiple studies revealed that 20% of those set asides had gone to white owned firms, which led to the 1973 amendment that stated specifically that these businesses had to be owned by minorities. But there are ways to get around this. And I don't mean to put this couple out there, but I remember walking into Sankofa. That's like an African, it's a store that sells African cultural goods. It used to be on Charles Street, and then they moved
Yeah,
to Pimlico. And
like
I
the right
remember,
couple.
yeah, I remember when I walked in, brother T, and I
Mm-hmm.
saw the white guy there, and I said, "Is this a black owned business?" And he said, "Yeah, this is a black owned business. My wife owns this." So
Mm-hmm.
it's ways to get around, even though these set asides were for um, minority owned businesses, but it's ways. I mean, you have white people who can say, well, look, man, step to a black person, say, put this company in your name, or we'll make you the face, we'll make you the owner of this so you can go after the contract and we'll give you a piece of the pie. So I understand what the SBA was trying to do,
Yeah,
but nonetheless, there are definitely workarounds
right.
for this sort of thing. She also talks about, I'm in the middle of page 185, in 1969, the Minority Bank Deposit Program. Okay, it says the Nixon Administration program simply asks government agencies to deposit their accounts in black banks. And they actually did that. Okay. They actually did that. But it says, all of the government deposits end up costing banks more than what they were actually worth.
Mm-hmm.
So Nixon asked them to put some of their money, their deposit in black banks. And
Mm-hmm.
they did. But again, I just want to reiterate that the deposits end up costing the banks more than what they were worth. And later on in the chapter, she says that because a lot of the deposits that they did make, brother T, and I'm trying to look for it right now. What did you say? Kind of mentioning things before you on
Yeah,
the
say
page.
it right.
Yeah, it's like, but she said they were costly because a lot of it, and I'm looking for it right now, family. So please forgive me. I'm looking for it. I saw where you talked about Robinson. Oh man, I'm looking for it. I'm all the way on page. Okay, da 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 da. It says by 1971, black banks. I'm on the bottom page of 202, family.
Right.
It says by 1971, black banks have received 44.9 million in government deposits, which made up 18% of their total deposit balances. In contrast, government deposits in white-owned banks were about 2%. Now it says that it was the wrong kind of deposits, right?
Right.
These were unstable accounts from government agencies. So they didn't give us the good accounts when they deposited the money in these black banks. They deposited money from accounts that were unstable. They put that in the black banks, which made it more costly to
Hmm.
manage those black banks. And so I
Yeah,
just wanted to kind of talk about that.
that's what I was trying to say earlier. With that the federal government gave us funding that we couldn't really benefit from, that we couldn't pay back, which was not a benefit at all. What we needed was deposits from people in our community. But in order to keep afloat, we got this bad debt from the United States government, which, like I said, is no benefit at all. So I'm glad you went back to clarify that part. That's a
Absolutely,
nice
and then affirmative action. I didn't even know that affirmative action came out under the Nixon administration. I mean, I heard of it, and I
Mm-hmm.
you know I heard of it, and understood the purpose of it or the alleged purpose of it, but I didn't know that it was drafted during the Nixon administration. So it says another piece of the Nixon administration's Black Capitalist program was affirmative action, which was initiated by the Equal Employment Opportunity Office with the aim of encouraging companies to hire more blacks. And so
Uh,
it says affirmative action. Go ahead, brother T. You wanted to jump in or?
I just want to thank Sister Crystal. She gave me the page that I was trying to I was trying to find earlier on page 197. I'm about the $300 loan. When you finish your point, Dr. Ma, I could read that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to. The point I was wanted to make was that it says affirmative action would be fiercely attacked by Nixon's own Republican Party until it was almost fully dismantled. It was more vulnerable than black capitalism because it costs whites more, and it will become the epicenter of a white backlash that claimed it was reverse discrimination. Isn't
Mm,
that something? Isn't that something, brother T? And peace to brother Lord Abba. He's in the building. Peace to you, brother. He
peace,
said, this is our lane right here. He
Lord
said,
Abba.
very, very familiar with her works. Hashtag Freedman. Peace to you, brother. Brother, you got to come up here when we read Dr. Darity's book, From Here to Equality, Reparations for Black Americans in the 21st Century. So I hope that when we read that, brother Lord Abba, that you would join us. So go with brother T with your
Awesome. Yeah, I'm saying Lord Abba, most definitely. Okay, so we um, um, go back to one page 197. Jackie Robinson. Let me go a little bit right here. So Jackie Robinson led a group of black and white investors to form the Freedmen National Bank up in Harlem. So that's what he hit hashtag Freedmen, which would become one of the largest black-owned banks of the era. After he left baseball, Jackie Robinson became convinced that there were two keys to the advancement of blacks in America: the ballot and the buck.
mm,
He became involved in both civil rights movement and the Republican Party, that is, until Nixon was elected. And he became convinced that the GOP didn't give a damn about the vote or the voters, because I believe uh, Jackie Robinson, he was going for Rockefeller. That's who he really wanted to be at that time. He was voting for Rockefeller. I think also as part of the Republican Party. So basically, we go to the part that I'm looking for. So Freeman Bank sold shares to the entire Harlem community. So, and Robinson emphasized that the bank's mission was to build the community, not just make profits, which is a plus because we always ask, what does the black bank or what can the black bank do for the community? It was giving money to the community. Okay. So Harlem churches and small businesses invested in the bank, and in turn, our black businesses invested inside of the bank. Now, Harlem churches and small businesses invested in the bank, not with the idea that they reap the benefit, according to a bank spokesman, but rather that Freeman would be a financial resource for people in the minority community to get loans. Robinson recounted hearing about white bankers who said he had never known a Negro in whom he had confidence for more than $300 alone. This is the point I was trying to make.
mm-hmm,
So a lot of blacks saw the Freeman Bank to be something to invest in. As I said, black businesses, black churches put money into it. First and foremost, they couldn't go anywhere else to get a loan. And as this right here, as stated by Robinson himself, he heard that a black banker wouldn't even give a $300 loan to a black person.
Mm.
So if banks at that time, I believe that they did an account that it was less than $8,000 invested into blacks at that time at this one bank. So that means not a lot of money was going to help anybody in the community. So that was the benefit of having that black bank. But just to have that, think about this, that when you need something, you need a home, you're trying to invest, and that bank will only give you $300. What is $300 going to do today, and what is $300 going to do in the 1960s?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Facts. Thank you for that. And thank you for that, Sister Crystal.
Thank,
Sister Crystal stay on it,
yeah, I appreciate
Sister Crystal she's right there, page 197. Sister Crystal is Sister Crystal is sharp. Sister Crystal is sharp. But Brother T, what you said was very, very powerful. And thank you so much for that breakdown. I just kind of want to go back to page 188. And so you're kind of ahead, but it's going to all merge because we'll be over soon, family. It'll be over soon. So it says at the bottom of page 188, it says that Nixon did reap a fast and instant result from black capitalism. The biggest win for his administration was that black capitalism turned out to be a very effective antidote to militant black uprisings. And
that.
so remember, after the riots, Brother T, in the 60s and they were scared. It was fear.
Mhm.
They feared what was going on. Even though black folks didn't have any political economic power, when black folks were burning down businesses and burning down things, there was a fear. And I think she talks about that. I can't find it. Maybe Sister Crystal could find it. But there was, she talked about how there was some fear in that. And so when he started talking about black capitalism and black power, it
Mhm.
was a way for him to quell the uprisings, because we don't need the uprise no more. Now the government is giving us black capitalism and black power. The government is allowing us to participate in free market capitalism and enterprise, create black enterprise. So it's no need at this point for the uprising. We got what we wanted. And so that was very strategic, I thought, Brother T, that he used, the rhetoric of black capitalism in order to what I want to say is quell black militant uprisings. So it says right here at the top of page 189, the Panthers were killed not by force, but by slow drying up of the funds and supporters, due both to a change in the environment, as you talked about earlier, Brother T, and to subtle subversion of their cause by President Nixon. First, the Vietnam War abated and the draft diminished. So they lost support from the white student protesters who no longer had a shared colonizer to fight. The other base of their support was a large part of the black community, the
Mhm.
moderates. This group was neutralized by superficial concessions from the administration. The concessions were black capitalism and affirmative action. So they felt like, hey, we got what we want. So it's no need to go out here and protest and to riot, right? Because we finally been given what we want. It says the movement's leaders themselves were divided over the lore of black capitalism, right? So it
Mhm.
says that, look at this. It says in the early 1970s, the Black Panther newsletter urged blacks to support the businesses that support our communities. A revolution having been through, the Panthers put aside talk about capitalist bloodsuckers and moved toward a more pragmatic approach of small black businesses, right? But then look at this. It says then you had exiled Black Panther leader Eldridge Cleavers, who split with Newton and Seal, right? And it says he wrote Stokely Carmichael, who had recently stepped down from the Panther leadership, an open letter in 1969, calling him out for providing the administration with a potent weapon against the black community. Black capitalism was just a continuation of black exploitation, according to Cleaver. It says he said that Carmichael had surrendered black power to the Nixon administration to be corrupted into black capitalism, right? Thereby rendering the term and the movement powerless. He says it
Mhm.
has been precisely your nebulous, this is what he said, your nebulous enunciation of black power, he scolded Carmichael, that has provided the power structure with this new weapon against our people. Cleaver believed that by
Mhm.
letting Nixon use the terminology of black power, the activists had surrendered the force of I'm sorry, of the revolutionary idea to be corrupted by the administration, who would cash in on the slogan and use it to ease the black bourgeois into the power structure. What are your thoughts on that, Brother T? Do you think that Eldridge Cleaver, do you think that he had a point in hindsight?
I think he did because you got to look at what he understood. There was no benefit to black capitalism. He also understood what we talked about today, that it was a decoy. He understood that Nixon was using it only to silence. He was using only to give a facade that things were going to get better if we were included. To understand capitalism at its purest sense, you have to understand there's going to be someone on top of the food chain and someone at the bottom of the food chain. And every program that was initiated and talked about in this chapter that Nixon tried to give to us was all empty. There was no power whatsoever that we could benefit from. There was no institutions that we was going to be in charge of. And if we were given place something we can be in charge of, like entrepreneur, starting our own business, he showed I'm only going to push entrepreneurship through a recession. I'm only going to push entrepreneurship and programs during a time when I stated no more federal funding.
Mm.
So there was not one program that was pushed through his administration that was going to be helpful. So yes, I do agree with Brother Cleveland.
All right. And so then, Brother T, on page 90, and I'm actually kind of like highlighted this as we go along, it talked about the theory behind developing a separate black economy had been that economic power would lead to political power. And that's what many of us have thought, that economic power, leads to political power. But salute to people like Dr. Jared Ball and others who are now saying, it may work the other way around. And I was one for believing that it may work the other way around, or if it's not political power yields economic power, then if we seek them, we have to seek them both, right? It can't be just like, oh. So I had a debate, not a really debate, but a discussion with a brother who was trying to convince me that once we get to economic power, we don't need political power. We just need economic power. And I used to have that thought
Mm-hmm.
process, so I could relate to the brother. But what I've come to realize is that politics controls the economics. So you can sit there and build up all your businesses if you want. But the government can come through and say, look, eminent domain, we need this space. We're going to create a highway that's going to
Okay.
run through these businesses. So now the politics then destroyed your economic, your economic or your business district,
That's right.
and so we had to make sure that we get that we seek political power. So it says the theory behind developing a separate black economy had been that economic power would lead to political power. That's what they actually thought. And not even just them. I'm sitting here thinking about Booker T. Washington. Booker T. Washington
He
had the
said it.
same the same the same mindset. W.E.B. Du Bois said, no, we need to go the other route, which is the full integration, get the political power. And then even though he still did support W.E.B. Du Bois, he still did support black capitalism, but he recognized that we need to get our rights. We need to get fully integrated into this system in order to do what we really want to do. But anyway,
How
go ahead.
old was he when he realized that black capitalism was not going to work? And where did he move Two.
He moved to Ghana.
That's right. He realized it ain't working for us. It's never gonna work for us. Goodbye. That's what he said. At 93, he's like, you know what? We're gonna lose this battle. Black capitalism is a deploy. I'm going to Ghana. I'm going to get me some Isuzu and some fufu. Peace out.
He sure did. He left.
He left.
He left. And a lot of us get tired. A lot of people are leaving, Brother T. People are bad. I see so many brothers and sisters online repatriated. It's ridiculous. And I was telling my mother years ago that I would have repatriated. The only thing that's keeping Dr. Ma'at here in the States right now is her parents, her elderly parents. You know, one is getting ready to turn 70, the other one is 75. And I don't want them, you know, I always say that if I were to repatriate, I don't want, you know, and I know that we have family members that could help my parents, but I wouldn't want to leave that, put that on them to help my parents. And I'm you know, only child. And so I wouldn't want I don't want to be a 16-hour plane ride or a
Yes, true.
10-hour plane ride away from my parents, you know, who are
Right.
going, you know, they're elders now. And, you know, and anything could happen. Anything could happen to me. Anything could happen to us. So I'm not putting anything on their life because of their age. But the reality is they are up in age and things happen. And
Mhm.
I don't want to be a 10 to 16-hour plane ride away from my parents. Other than that, Brother T, I would be out.
I get you.
I would be out. I would be somewhere on Cape Coast by the water, chilling. Okay, teaching STEM to African children, and that's what I would be doing. But you know, I'm here nonetheless. But anyway, so I have that W.E.B. Du Bois mindset that I'm ready to go. This government, like you said, is a losing battle, and sometimes I wake up and it's just like I feel like we are fighting a losing battle, and it doesn't feel good. I'll just say that sometimes I just have those moments. You know, I have those moments.
When it comes down to what this to the end of this chapter that we that stressed and we went straight to the boy how he felt. Um, you come down to when you realize all the myths and when you dispel the myths, you realize how many games have been played upon us.
Yes, yes,
So
yes.
when you look at the games that were played, and as we read this chapter, we got hints of what we hear today. So when you hear that and realize that people haven't even learned from the past, this is how you can feel the way you just mentioned. You can feel like, are we going to get it? Are we going to
Mm-hmm.
learn from what has been written before? Because we have black banks, we had big businesses. Um, Now we understand that we have to understand that we have to be part of industries,
Right.
create industries, be part of new waves, and not fall for the tomfoolery that these politicians put into play. And in this chapter, what she did was pretty good. She explained thoroughly how Nixon put us in a segregated trap, and this trap was basically giving us our problems to fix for ourselves, but putting us in a bubble, our own little colony, and for them to not help us as they has helped other people in the past.
Mm-hmm. 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 And Brother T, I love how she exposed Jesse Jackson. I'm looking at the bottom of page 91 and how Jesse was against black capitalism. Then all of a sudden he was for Jesse's just been phony for decades. And she called it out. I have in the margin at the bottom of page 195, phony. It says a black leader who embodied this change. So remember, it says the harvest of black capitalism was the retreat of the black radical groups from center stage and the emergence of a more pragmatic, moderate, and business oriented black leadership. A black leader who embodied this change was Jesse Jackson. We call him Dr. Khalid Muhammad called him Messy Jesse, right? So Messy Jesse Jackson went from a forthright denunciation of black capitalism in 1969 to becoming its champion just 1 year later. It says in 1969, he called black capitalism a divisive force in the black community, which should be seeking a total economic development of the black community instead of few additional entrepreneurs. He said that attaching the name black to capitalism is not a description, but a diversion. But by 1970, He advertised his Black Expo as an annual trade fair for Black business, both local and national, as well as a general celebration of Black capitalism. He sounded Nixonian when he said in 1970 that Blacks would rather own an A&P grocery store than to burn it. He urged Blacks to focus less on fiery speeches on the corner of 125th and 7th Avenue and try to own the corner instead. Messy Jesse has flip flopped for decades.
He's gonna find his way in.
Yeah, he's gonna find his way. He's gonna find his way. And it says that he started a an operation called Push, People
Mhm.
United to Save Humanity, where he asked the Black community to buy insurance from Black issuers and deposit money in Black banks. So it says that other organizations such as the National Urban League and NAACP and Howard University launched programs focused on promoting Black businesses after the program launched. And then, Brother T, just to summarize, she moves the conversation into the propaganda around Black capitalism. She talks about how in 1970, Black Enterprise launched a new magazine primarily focused on highlighting Black business success. And we still see that today. It says in 1973, the Black magazine debuted a list of the top 100 Black owned businesses, which prompted Nixon's praise as clear evidence that the government, in active partnership with private sector, can create the kind of climate of opportunity in which those with energy and drive can share more equitably in the rewards of the world's most productive economic system. She also talks about the television show The Jeffersons. Remember, where they're moving on up
That's the east side.
to the east side.
Mhm.
And it said it featured George Jefferson's successes and struggles as a dry cleaning tycoon in Harlem and opened with the theme song, We Moving On Up. So there was a lot of propaganda around, Black capitalism, promoting Black capitalism. And then, or at the top of page 193, she mentions the class tensions that that were that started happening. There was a bunch of class tensions. So it said, on one hand, the Black community lauded its successful entrepreneurs as symbol of racial progress and as a counter narrative to claims of Black inferiority. But on the other hand, Black intellectual and activists continue to blame Black businessmen for making profits out of a segregated economy that kept a majority of Blacks impoverished. So what are your thoughts on that, Brother T?
Oh, that's the whole point. The whole point of that. Um, it made me think about what going back to what Theodore Cross stated, about the Black banks being a diversion. Do you remember him saying that on page 203?
Yes.
Basically said that Theodore Cross understood that Black banking had become a diversion. And he wrote in his 1971 that Black banks were still just toy banks or specks of gold dust in the $1 trillion private capital and credit markets of America. So basically saying that through all those efforts, through all those banks, through all the things that we realize is just a diversion that we never really had anything of any substantial when it came to the American banking system. And when you talk about the shows, it's amazing. You can tell the climate once again of politics, depending on what we see on our TV. At that time, you had the Jeffersons. Later on, you had Good Times. They talk about the Chicago pop projects.
Yep, 15.
When you later on, you heard it in the Cosby era, which encouraged us all to go to school and rack up those federal student loans, or go, to go to the HBCUs.
Mm-hmm.
So
different world.
Different world. I know that encouraged me to go to Coppin State University. You know what I'm saying? I'm sure it helped you to go to Morgan as well. So
absolutely, I wanted to go to HBCU.
Right. So during this time frame, they push all these things to the community, and as an example, as the author showed, the political climate created shows that we watched in our living rooms, and that motivated us to do a lot of things. And we don't understand why, But those who understood what was happening politically through policies, it was a reason why that push. Why? Let's think about it. We talked about it before in our last book on
Mm-hmm.
why certain universities and certain businesses get marketing dollars. You know, hey, if this TV show want to be aired this time, you need some money. What did Nielsen prove? You know, it didn't prove that we had buying power. It just
Mm-hmm.
showed that certain shows, certain businesses got marketing dollars, and that's what they could market to us. And the federal government used this to market economic inclusion.
And this gives credence to what Baba Mwalimu Barudi always talks about. He said everything we see and hear is political. Everything we see and hear is political. And you just nailed it, Brother T, when you said if you look at the TV shows that were created and aired during those times, there's a correlation with the political climate of those times, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
it just like I said, Brother Baba was just on here,
Mm-hmm.
and he said, yeah, he said everything you see and you hear is political.
Ooh.
Everything.
And Knight Rider made a point in the chat. He says, but George Jefferson still had a white landlord who
Ah,
owned the apartment building because they didn't give us true ownership of anything that would give us true wealth in this country. So
facts.
that was a point that was placed in this chapter as well, because we wanted
Facts.
to have our own institutions. We wanted to have the hotels. We wanted to control the banks. We wanted to control. He said, no, we're not giving you the true definition of power. We only gonna give you the cloak of power.
Coca Power. Absolutely. And I love, Brother T, how you drove home in the subsequent pages that she talks about how, black banks didn't lend to us. And what they wanted to do was it's called relational lending, meaning that they met with potential borrowers and made lenders decisions based on personal interactions. And so they didn't loan money to us. But she talks about how the mafia was a source of capital for for
So glad you brought it up.
for yeah, so for black businesses. I think this is at the top of page 194. That it says because white banks were not lending to blacks, black businessmen turned to the mafia for venture capital funding.
You know how
One
Motown started?
Oh, Brother T, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it.
Is that how
Brother,
Motown
brother,
started?
brother T, don't do it, don't do it, don't do
Okay.
it.
Got
It
more
said,
from the mob.
look, it said one estimate held that 25% of black business was financed by the mafia.
Yeah.
Woo, woo.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, so they normally show the mafia. They always show black people, black drug lords buying from the mafia and doing that, but they never tell you that it was actually other black legit black businesses who borrowed money, started money from the mafia. So
And
it talked about. Go ahead, Brother T.
I mean, you couldn't get no more than $300 in some instances when it came down to getting loans, as we learned on page 197. So we had to go somewhere to probably get high interest loans. Can you imagine the interest that was placed on that loan from the mafia?
Mm-hmm.
And this is probably the reason why they control so much. Now think about this: the mafia also controlled a lot of unions, which businesses ran. So I guess they say, hey, if we give you money, we want to control some stake of it as well. You never know how these things are set up.
Mm-hmm. 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 And Brother T, you already talked about Jackie Robinson, right? You already talked
Yes.
about what he was doing. I just because I don't want to rediscuss something, like I don't want to reiterate it if you already talked about it. Because on these pages she moved into, she talked about black blanks, and like you said, how we couldn't get what was it on page 197 right here. He
Okay.
never known a Negro. Yep. Jackie recounted hearing about white banker who said that he never heard a Negro whom he had confidence in for more than a $300 loan. And so, did you talk about what Jackie Robinson did, the bank that he opened, and things of that nature? Did you already touch on that or
Yeah,
not
we,
really?
we, yeah, we skimmed past that. The point I wanted to make is when he stated that throughout all of the things he's done, going to the military, segregated military, going through the baseball major leagues, Also, civil rights. Nothing was harder than running this black bank
And the name of the black bank, Brother T, was called the Freedom National Bank, which
in
was in
Harlem.
Harlem. Yeah, it says he opened it with a group of black and white investors.
Hmm.
All right. And so yeah, you're right. And it said he ended up dying from a heart attack. It said he said many sleepless nights over the bank's failing books and even suffered from very serious health crisis on the account of stress. It says, in
Hmm.
fact, Robinson died of a heart attack in 1972 at the age of 53, shortly after the bank's most serious troubles and before the bank was able to turn a profit. Oh my goodness. And so she moves the discussion into talking about other banks that opened up. So you had the Freedom National Bank in Harlem, but then you also had the Unity Bank. I'm at the page. I'm on page 199. The Unity Bank and Trust Company, which was the second biracial bank, which was founded in 1968 to serve the black population of Roxbury, a black district in Boston. And so I don't know. I think this bank, I think it ended up closing. Let me go back. It says the bank was off to a solid start as many community helped with its startup capital. It says the Commonwealth of Massachusetts even deposited 360,000 in the bank, becoming
Hmm.
its single largest depositor. All right. And so it said that they it says with even with the entire community support, Unity struggled to remain profitable. And I'm trying to think when it closed. I think it ended up closing, family. I just gotta go find the page where it did close.
Are you talking about Jackie Robinson's bank?
No, the Unity Bank, Brother
Okay,
T. Then it did eventually close, right?
I can't remember
I think
too.
it closed in the 2000s. Sister Crystal, let me know if the bank closed in the 2000s. But this just goes back to um I mean, she's saying all this to say that we made efforts to open up black banks. So that stuff that Ti and Killer Mike was talking about, support black banks and all this other stuff. We've done that before, and you see where it's gotten us. All
Yeah.
right. So, brother T, we're at page 200. You want to start summarizing?
Okay, we have page 200. I have something on 202. Let me see. Let me see where we are on 200. Um,
I think
okay.
I actually did. I actually finished with 200, where we were talking about the Unity Bank, and then at the bottom of page 200, she talks about Andrew Bremer, and it says Andrew Bremer offered the sharpest critique of black capitalism and black banking.
Thank you.
And yeah, it said that Bremer forcefully, and I'll work it up to 202 so you can take it from there. But it says Bremer forcefully denounced black capitalism, maintaining that the only real promising path to equal opportunity for Negroes in business, as in other aspects of the economic activity, lies in what you say, T, full participation in an integrated national economy. It cannot be found in a backwater of separation and segregation. He called black capitalism a cruel hoax and the one of the worst digressions that has attracted the attention and pulled substantial numbers of people off course. It
Hmm.
says in 1971, Bremer testified before the House Committee on Small Business Opposition to Black Capitalism, explaining that Black families who were meant to be the cornerstone of the Black business market simply did not have enough wealth or income to support a viable industry. And so
Hmm.
then Robert S. Brown explained that there's no question of pulling ourselves up by the bootstraps, but we have no bootstraps. That's what I said
Right.
earlier in the discussions. So it says Bremer went on to say that black bankers should not be encouraged in the belief that they can make a major contribution to financing the economic development in the black community. In previous pages, I think not even previous pages, in subsequent pages, she's going to describe how black banks came up with strategies to operate safely. But in operating safely, they could not make profits, right? So they, remember, they said that the federal government um, um, stated that all banks had to put a certain amount of money into government. Where is it? I'm trying to look for the word, family. You had to put a certain amount of money into government. Where are we, family? Hold on. I'm looking for it right now. Goodness to you. I'm looking forward. But they had to deposit a certain amount of money, and I know I'm going to come across it, a certain amount of money into the government. I forgot what they call it. It's called government something, but they had to deposit a certain amount of money into the government. And so black banks were trying to play it safe. So in trying to play it safe, they couldn't turn a profit. And so, Brimmer's sitting here saying, hold up, they just need to be
Okay.
honest, and they should not be encouraged in the belief that they can make major contribution to the financing of economic development in the black community. He also emphasized that the objective of these banks of fostering economic growth in the black communities was critically important. He just did not believe that black owned banks were up for the task. He dismissed the banks as mere ornaments
Mhm.
suitable only for a mark of distinction or a badge of honor, which provides a symbol of accomplishment. They might be a source of racial pride, he said, but they would never become vital instruments in economic development. Go ahead, Brother T. You're on page 202.
No, part two and two. That's what he kind of summed it up in that sense. Then that it was clear that Nixon did not understand the segregation trap. Before we go on, because it was a question inside the chat that you just cleared up that CK the poet asks
Let me put
about
up.
Kwame Ture pushing for socialism and communism. So it says, Dr. Ma'at, my question was both of you guys' position on communism and socialism and how people like Kwame Ture, as brother Stokely Carmichael,
Right.
try to encourage it to um, try to encourage it. Number two, your opinion on people that say we need to become capitalists too. When you answered that question based off what Killer Mike and what we say about black banking, capitalism is kind of empty when it comes down to black capitalism. So when people say that we have to enter to that, we're not given the 1% tools to do it solely on ourselves because we don't
Exactly.
have any full ownership of our institutions. Black capitalism only work when money and complete control of institutions are tied together.
Facts.
You have to control your entities in order to understand how capitalism works. When it comes down what Kwame Ture, our ancestor, talked about, he understands that socialism and communism gave power to the people. The people made the rules and regulations for government. So he wanted us to have the power, us to have the power of our own institutions, of our communities, of our laws, how we govern ourselves. This is the reason why he pushed that. And that's why it was an enemy to capitalism as America sees it. Now, so for those who speak about capitalism, they have to understand, are we going to be 100% in capitalism? Are we going to be in 100% of the American economic system, the free trade, trading with the world? Are we going to be part of all of those major institutions, the technology, and all the things from abroad, the commodities, what we see happening today? Are we going to be a part of that? Are we going to be a part of the oil? Are we going to be part of the dollar?
Mm-hmm.
Are we going to be part of what's happening right now of the grain, the wheat? Are we going to be part of those industries to understand the true part of capitalism and control? That's the thing we have to look at. That's the thing that we have to understand.
No, that facts. And thank you for that, Brother T, for answering her question. I just wanted to go back. Remember, I said that black banks they were required by law to put a certain amount of money into the government. I was looking for government securities. So a certain amount of money had to go into government securities. And it says black banks formed after 1963 they invested a staggering 40% of their assets in government securities. This meant that they could make fewer loans and therefore could take fewer profits, which meant their investors made less money on their investments. And so I love on page 202, Brother T, I would say from 202 all the way to 204, it talked about the reasons why black banks didn't turn a profit. And it also discussed why black banks could not finance or bankroll the economic development of the black community. So you got 40% of your money tied up in government securities, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you also have unstable accounts from government agencies being deposited into your bank. And then you have, it says right here the black banks were taking deposits from the community and channeling them to investments in government securities that were being used to finance mortgages in other communities. So
Communities.
our money was trickling into the white communities, right?
Mm-hmm.
It talked about how it talked about how they had to charge black banks had to charge higher service fees to make up for their expenses. It talked about how um, black banks held on to more cash and other liquid assets, which meant that more of their money sat dormant at the bank instead of yielding profits through fractional reserve lending, right? So it says, in other words, black banks were not able to use fractional reserve lending to multiply or even keep the black dollar within the ghetto. For the most part, they either held the black dollar dormant in a bank vault, or they invested it in white community through government securities. In any case, they were not able to control the black dollar or multiply in the ghetto, which was their raison d'etre. I guess I butchered that. And the reason they supported and celebrated both white and black lenders as the key to growing a separate economy. So black banks just couldn't do it, brother T. And like you said, in order for it to work, we had to be able to control the black dollar and keep the black dollar in our community. But as you can see, investing in black banks, the money was trickling right back into the white community. Go ahead, brother
Right.
T.
And that's what we have to look at. And we're going to on page 206. Let's go to page 207. However, the demand for economic redress by the black movement came at the same moment that capitalism itself seemed to be under siege by revolutionary communist regimes abroad. In the fog of domestic and foreign war and an existential Cold War, it was hard to draw lines. Identifying enemies at home turned out to be just as confusing as finding them in jungles of Vietnam. Remember, we were going through a war at one time, right? So the
Right.
Panthers and Viet Cong, the Russians, student protesters, domestic terrorists, all challenged the status quo and led to a paralyzing fear. Nixon's gift to the American public was his ability to draw crisp lines between real Americans and new doers or do wells,
Mm,
hippies, draft dodgers, and black activists were the later. So he said, "Hey, Americans, we're going to put these dog whistle politic terms, and we want to also make sure we have the Southern strategy terms that we created to let you know who's against capitalism and the new way America is moving forward." So they're the real Americans. So basically, he played it, and so it says here
mm,
at the bottom of page 207, he says, and black activists were later. Black protesters were often labeled communists, including Martin Luther King, who was wiretapped and blackmailed by Hoover's FBI as a domestic enemy. So King felt compelled to respond. You don't have to go to Karl Marx to learn how to be a revolutionary. I didn't get my inspiration from Karl Marx. I got it from the man named Jesus. So
mm,
King was not a communist, but many principles of the Black Power movement, which was the brother was stating about Kwame Ture, he says, but many principles of the Black Power movement were communists or communist sympathizers who associated with Cuba, China, and other revolutionary regimes. The 93-year-old W.E.B. Du Bois, living in Ghana, joined the Communist Party in 1960 before his death, laminating that capitalism could not save itself. So I wanted to make sure I read that part because that kind of went right into what C.K. the poet was stating about Kwame Ture and his communist sympathizer, his quotes that was against capitalism.
mm. Hold up, T. I'm over here. You on the bottom of page 10207?
209. I went 209.
Oh, okay, 209. Okay, my bad.
No problem.
The bottom. So did you read where it says the most potent weapon against the demand for reparations? Did you
No,
talk about that?
no, you read that.
Okay. All right. All right. All right. So you didn't read that. All right. Hold on. We talked about that free capitalism. Okay. Yeah, I wanted to drive that point home. That yeah, the most potent weapon against the demand for reparations was capitalism, and we actually talked about that earlier in the discussion, how they weaponize capitalism against any type of government program, to redress the economic um, I guess you would say violations that were past violations, the past economic violations to us. And so, anyway, she says that the most potent weapon against the demand for reparations was capitalism. Free market fundamentalists said that reparations or compensatory capital was anti-capitalist. And like you said, brother T, anything that was anti-capitalist, as soon as you say that, people, they denounced you or denounced whatever you were trying to push forward. So it says, shortly after the civil rights community had asked for the equal opportunity myth to be made reality, white majoritarian backlash demanded that the new law treat everyone equally based on race and bestow no special base favors. And so when the black community began rejecting the deviant ghetto market and demanding a share of the American capitalism, the response it received was pure capitalism with a hardcore libertarian edge. Equality and capitalism were used as weapons against black demands for inclusion. It says, just as equality had become a noose around the first wave of the civil rights demands, capitalism was used to strangle the second wave of economic demand. So it seems like they used the things that we wanted, against us:
You did.
equality and capitalism. They used it as weapons to not give into the demands that the things that we were asking for.
Because those terms, you look at capitalism. It's nothing about capitalism states that we're given to social programs. That's why they didn't like communism. Like they didn't want to hear socialism. They didn't want to hear about these terms because you have to give to the people. The people, the big business, have to take care of the employees, and that's totally against what capitalism stands for. So they wanted to do anything that stated that profit has to be given or shared to the people.
Mm.
And this is the reason, that's the main reason. That's why they will shoot you down when you talk about social programs. Let's do away with social programs. That's done. They don't help, they don't work. They do anything to discredit affirmative action, even though it has helped some in society. Anything that gives a helping hand, they want to dispel away with because that means that more programs alike shall be created to give to the people. And that's one thing that they don't want to do. No more help, no more power to the people.
Mhm. And so she moves in at the page of family. We only have four more pages left. And thank you so much for hanging with us. And so she moves the discussion into the guy Greenspan, who
That one.
typed up a memo. Can you summarize that for us, brother T?
Okay, what page will be coming from? Okay,
Two,
page
two,
211.
210, the second paragraph. You can actually read that entire paragraph. That
Cool.
sums up the memo.
Greenspan underscored in the memo his belief that capitulation to demands from federal spending and the ghetto was a threat to free enterprise. Once again, Greenspan said that it was a threat to free enterprise. He believed that the crisis for exploitation were not only misguided, but had destroyed the status of the more moderate line Negro civil rights leaders and turned the black middle class into anti capitalists.
Mm,
He rejected the liberal notion that the Negro ghetto must be elevated to the level, to the affluence of the middle class. Once again, remember what Romney tried to do. Romney tried to say, hey, do away with the ghetto, but you got to put them somewhere, put them in integration into the suburbs where they could thrive, where they could benefit from. That's what he believes. But Greenspan says no. Let's do it. Let's not say that the black middle class anti-capitalist. He rejected the liberal notion that the Negro ghetto must be elevated. to the level of affluence of middle class America, because this can only be done by massive governmental expenditures. Once again, this whole administration was not about putting no more money into the black community, because he realized Alan Greenspan, which is one of their greatest economists, they believe, stated that in order to move forward, he knew that you had to dump money, something that we actually needed to build, to elevate the ghetto. And they was no longer trying to do that. Remember, only empty promises.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What you want to add on to that from the
No,
page?
no, no, no. That was beautiful. And I just who was Greenspan? I'm trying to go back. Greenspan was who was he? Al Greenspan.
Yeah,
Okay, so he
yeah.
served as Nixon's economic advisor. So I wanted to just I think when I just said Greenspan, I don't think we talked about who he his position
Yeah,
actually.
Greenspan, all been through all presidential. He's been through, I believe, he even did the Clinton administration. He been still. He's a real old man. He still believe in his words.
Mm, never recanted what he said, huh?
No, not that.
No, never recanted what he said. All right, and so he talked about Greenspan, and then it was Friedman's. You had Friedman's who wrote a book in 1962 on capitalism and freedom. He said that anti-discrimination laws were an interference with the freedom of individuals to enter into voluntary contracts with one another. He compared laws prohibiting discrimination to laws requiring discrimination, such as the infamous Nuremberg laws, and it was all unjustified government intervention. He believed that markets would themselves root out discrimination because it was costly and inefficient. And he claimed that anyone who opposed buying goods from black businessmen or employing black employees was expressing an inefficient preference and would therefore pay a higher price for that preference. So Baradaran says that theoretically this was true, but historically it wasn't. She says because the ghetto had cordoned off a segment of risky borrowers. Whites actually paid significantly less for goods, credit, and housing. Racial discrimination had not cost whites, but had actually brought many advantages in the form of all white suburbs, lower competition for lucrative jobs, and labor protections that benefited whites at the expense of blacks. And so literally when she said all of this stuff, I it just took my mind back to the book we've read, Brother T, called The Cost of Being an African American by Thomas Shapiro. All right. And so she says this at the middle of page 211. She says the historical American reality was that blacks have never fully participated in free market capitalism, and that whites had benefited from heavy government interventions that had worked to the direct disadvantage of blacks. The arteries and trade and commerce had not flowed freely through the ghetto, at least not in the realm of credit and banking. The credit markets lay atop a federal government apparatus, including guarantees, secondary markets, deposit insurance, and Federal Reserve support. The only place where those forces were not intervening was inside the ghetto. The ghetto itself had been an unnatural creation of anti market impositions of racist policies. Indeed, discrimination was incredibly costly, but only to blacks. She called the ghetto, Brother T, an unnatural creation of
Mm.
anti-market impositions of racist policies. Good God Almighty, Brother T. Good God Almighty. And so, anyway, she moves on to talk about, Barry Goldwater and his failed presidential run in 1964. And it said that Goldwater, his whole demand, the whole push, Brother T, was for less government intervention. And yeah,
Libertarian.
go ahead, Brother T. Go ahead, expound on it, please.
Oh, basically, this is a new part of government. Now you look at having more control of yourself by being a libertarian, and this is what Barry Goldwater has pushed. As we go on, it states a little bit. Ran in 1964, watershed moment for libertarian market principles on the national political stage and created a movement that only grew stronger over time. Goldwater demanded less government involvement and spending in all spheres without spewing the racial animus of George Wallace. So they basically, libertarians are even worse. They're like, you know what? Government should even intervene on people's lives.
Mm.
So a libertarian goes off on page 213. It says that for the ascendant libertarian who were taking hold of American politics, the only acceptable remedy for a history of exclusion was black capitalism. So he wanted to push black capitalism as well, right? But what these white policymakers surely meant by black capitalism was capitalism for blacks only. So black capitalism was, hey, it's only for you, nobody else, right? So
Mm-hmm.
so basically, government intervention in markets had been the norm, as were government imposed Jim Crow laws. Now, this is the point I want to bring it home. Capitalism had not created the ghetto and black poverty. This is what libertarians believe, that capitalism had not created the ghetto and black poverty. Racist laws and state intervention in the markets had created both.
Hold up. Where are you? You on page 213?
I'm on page 213, last paragraph.
Oh, go good. That was
He,
fired.
he
Hmm.
says that government intervention in markets. See, now he's trying to say, now, hey, let's tell you what it really is. It's government interventions in markets had been the norm, as were government imposed Jim Crow laws. Capitalism had not created the ghetto and black poverty. The racist laws and state intervention in the markets had created both. So, what the libertarians were saying, let's understand this. Capitalism is not to blame. Capitalism is what's needed. But what we need is the government stop creating these racist laws, and you basically that's what happens. So the capitalism is per sense. So for those who push it, is assuming that we're going to have black capitalism alone, like what he's like as stated in this chapter. Black capitalists need black capitalism. Like for us, we need our own entity, meaning we need our own enterprise, control, complete control, without the racist hand of government
Mm.
intervening. That's what they this is what this part of libertarian proved, that hey, come on now, don't blame capitalism. Look at how racist government was. They created Jim Crow, and they also intervened in the blacks building up for themselves. Think about it. Capitalism was created, correct? But
Mm-hmm.
we were locked out of capitalism. Why? Because of the racist laws and interventions from the policies that were created. So this is what this part of that chapter was saying. So it was acknowledging, don't blame capitalism, blame the government's racist hand.
Mm.
That's what it's.
Mm.
So if capitalism is to work for us, we have to get rid of those racist hands, those laws, those policies that locked us out. Because what it has created was someone on top and made sure the people at the bottom stayed at the bottom.
No, that's what happened.
That's what libertarians say. Do away with government's intervention. Thus, it will work.
Do you think that's true though?
Hell no.
Okay, that's what I'm about to say. Like I'm like, okay, they say it, but like, okay, if that was the case,
And,
what is it true? And you
I
like,
mean,
hell no,
and,
it's not.
then it says it is the irony of the politics of libertarianism is that it ran comfortable alongside draconianism, criminal justice system, which was the antithesis of liberty. Both Nixon and Goldwater strongly supported federal intervention in the form of stronger police state. So basically, even though he was a libertarian and it sounds good, black capitalism, create your own jobs, don't have government to intervene. Basically saying the same thing. Criminalize blacks.
Mm, so there you have it, brother T. Is there anything else on page 214 you wanted to discuss?
That was it.
Anything on nothing on 214? Okay. All right. Well, this was a long chapter. This was like 50 pages, but I agree with Sister Crystal Denise that it was 50 pages with facts, 50 pages of facts. Like it's like you can't just have a conversation and skip past all of these facts. Like this was some really good stuff, some really good information. And so, family, join us next week as we discuss chapter 7, entitled "The Free Market Confronts Black Poverty." The free market confronts Black poverty. Family, we're almost finished. I think we have 2 more chapters, chapter 7, chapter 8, and I definitely want to discuss the epilogue. So we'll have like 3 more discussions on the color of money. And then we're going to move into our next book. Okay. And that next book is either going to be The Color of Law or When Affirmative Action Was White. What did we decide, Brother T? I forgot. What did you suggest? Did
Wow.
you say we needed
I
to
love both of
read?
those books.
Yeah, which
Um,
one did you say we needed to go first?
the color of law.
You want to read that one before we do When Affirmative Action Was White?
Yeah,
Before we read?
because
Mhm.
if we read affirmative action as white, it would go back to some of the things like Reconstruction, the New Deal. So it would take us back in some chapters. If we understand that the color of law, we can continue to go forward to understand how the government played in creating the ghetto.
Mhm. Mhm.
That's basically how they created the ghetto as we see it in this chapter and beyond. So that was, I think, that when affirmative action was white is a good finish and a good summary for those who may have missed the other books to go back and read those books because it explains exactly how whites got benefits from federal government. For those who still want to believe that hey, we can do it and that we can do it without do it totally by ourselves, go realize how America built their wealth, and that's when affirmative action was white.
Mm. Okay, so we're gonna read after this, family. The Color of Money. I already have the book. It's on my shelf because when you told me to get it years ago, brother T, I went and got it. I think you told me to get it like in 2018, 2019, and I went and got it, but just didn't read it. And so, family, after we finish, we have 3 more discussions left on The Color of Money. And so after that, we're going to read The Color of Law and then When Affirmative Action Was White. So I'm telling you this, family, so that if you didn't get this book, if you didn't get The Color of Money, that you go ahead and you can grab The Color of Law and grab When Affirmative Action Was White. And after we read When Affirmative Action Is White, we'll read the book by Dr. Sandy Darity, um, From Here to Equality, Reparations for Black Americans in the 21st Century. So those are the next 3 books that we're going to be reading in that order. And so if you want to grab the books now and kind of, I don't want you to start reading them yet, but I do want you to start, grabbing them now so that when we tackle them, you have it. So family, join us back here next Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for chapter 7 of The Color of Money, Black Banks and a Racial Wealth Gap by Baradaran. Thanks for hanging with us, family. I know that it was like a huge, it was a long chapter and a long discussion. But you know what, Brother T? I love your sign up. You said join us back. You pointed to chapter 7. But yeah, family, thank you so much for hanging with us. I appreciate all of you. Definitely make sure that you like the video and make sure that you thumb up the video, family, and have a blacktastic week. I'll probably be back live, Brother T, one day this week, maybe on Tuesday or Wednesdays. Those are my Tuesday or Thursday. Those are my lighter days at work. So Tuesday
Okay.
or Thursday, I might be back live. It's an Instagram brother who wants to talk about Black History Month. He said that we're celebrating a legacy of slavery. So I'm gonna bring him on and beat him up really badly, but I'm gonna let him embarrass himself and then beat him up really badly. So I'll probably be on Tuesday or Thursday to talk to that brother who said that those who celebrate Black History Month is celebrating a legacy of slavery. So I'll be bringing that brother on to talk about his position. So family, have a blacktastic week. Peace and Black power.